when we think about fire, I feel like the image that usually comes to mind is a wildfire, just consuming a forest.
Right, yeah. Like, totally unpredictable.
Exactly, just devouring everything in its path with this blind, chaotic rage.
It's raw, unbridled destruction. I mean, it feels entirely out of our control when we picture it like that.
But then you look at a welder's torch, and it is the exact same element, fire, but concentrated, precise.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. It doesn't just blindly destroy. It cuts through solid steel to, like, forge something entirely new. That is the absolute definition of controlled aggression.
Yeah, it really is.
And that threshold between a chaotic blaze and a precise cutting torch, that's exactly where Miyamoto Musashi operates in the Fire Book, which is the third section of his legendary text, The Book of Five Rings. Welcome, by the way, to today's deep dive. We are getting right into it today.
We really are. And, to understand the shift happening in this specific text, we really have to look at the progression for a second.
Okay, yeah. Lay it out for us.
So the earlier ground book, that built the foundation, right? It provided the master carpenter's architectural plan, basically.
Right, the structure.
Exactly. And then the water book established fluidity and adaptability, making the spirit, like water taking the shape of whatever container it's in.
Which is very philosophical, very smooth.
Right. But then you hit the fire book, and he completely abandons that theoretical philosophy. Musashi writes that the spirit of fire is fierce. So this section is entirely about the brutal reality of execution.
And he's making it very clear that he is not interested in, like, decorative swordplay or just using your fingertips, I think he calls it.
Yeah, fingertip strategy. He hates that.
Right. He is writing about life and death survival, whether you're facing one opponent in an alleyway or, 10,000 on a battlefield.
And that's why it's so relevant.
Exactly. For anyone joining us on this deep dive, the reason Musashi's concept of fire matters to you today is because it serves as a masterclass in the art of timing.
It really does. It's all about timing.
It explores how to read a situation so deeply that you can control an adversary's actions before they even make a move. Which is just, it's wild to think about.
It is. And, we can start unpacking this by looking at how he approaches the physical reality of a clash.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't start with how to swing the sword.
Right. He starts with where you're standing.
Yes. He focuses entirely on the geometry of survival. He advises taking an attitude with the sun behind you.
Which seems basic, but it's huge.
Huge. And if the environment prevents that, you keep the sun on your right side. Indoors, the strategy shifts to keeping the entrance to your rear or to your right.
So you're always controlling the space.
Always.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond just static positioning. He actually instructs the warrior to physically chase the enemy into awkward places.
Like driving them into corners and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Thresholds, lintels, bad footholds. You literally pin them against obstacles so they cannot look around to assess their own situation.
So you completely dominate the physical space before the swords even cross.
That's the goal.
And this really highlights his disdain for what he calls those small techniques, like just moving a bamboo practice sword around in a perfectly pristine dojo.
Oh, he has no time for the pristine dojo mindset.
Because he insists on the raw reality of wearing rokugu, which, for those listening, is full Japanese armor. We're talking helmet, mask, body armor, thigh pieces, heavy gauntlets.
Right.
It reminds me, honestly, of a chess player who only memorizes flashy opening moves from a book.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Like, they look brilliant in the first 5 minutes under perfectly controlled conditions, but the second the actual mid-game gets messy and, pieces are out of place, they completely panic because they don't understand the underlying principles of the board itself.
Exactly. The bamboo sword is that memorized opening, while the heavy armor is the chaotic mid-game. I mean, imagine trying to execute some delicate wrist flick when you're carrying 50 pounds of metal and lacquered leather.
Yeah, and your vision is restricted by a mask.
Right. And you're fighting for your life. If your technique relies entirely on the ideal conditions of a training hall, it's going to fail the second you trip on a stone or, when the sun glares in your eyes.
Right.
Musashi forces this realization that the environment is an active participant in the conflict. It's not just a backdrop.
But okay, let me push back on this for a second. Fighting with the sun in an opponent's eyes, or intentionally pinning them against a doorframe so they trip on the threshold, that feels entirely devoid of honor, doesn't it?
Well,
I mean, we are talking about a legendary samurai here. The expectation is like a noble duel at high noon with bowing and mutual respect. This just sounds cheap.
I get why you'd say that, But Musashi is completely stripping away the romanticism of the duel here. Fire isn't about honor in a sporting sense because, frankly, there are no referees.
True. Nobody's blowing a whistle.
Exactly. The focus is the pure physics of survival. Failing to use the sun or failing to use the architecture of a room isn't honorable. It is a fatal failure of perception. The environment is a weapon, period.
Okay, that makes sense. But
Okay.
dominating the geometry of the room is useless if you just, freeze up when the swords are actually drawn.
Right. You have to be able to act.
So how does Musashi bridge that gap between standing in the right place and actually initiating the strike?
So he outlines 3 specific methods for forestalling the enemy. Basically
Nice.
taking the lead. These are the 3 sen.
P3 sen. Okay.
Yeah. And they cover every possible temporal phase of combat. Before the enemy acts, after they commit, and simultaneously.
Break those down for us.
Sure. The first is ken no sen, which is forestalling by attacking. You keep completely calm, but you dash in quickly and strongly, crushing the enemy from first to last. You force them under the defensive immediately.
Got it. You just overwhelm them right out of the gate.
Exactly.
And then the second method, Tai no sen, is waiting for the initiative. And he says the instruction here is to feign weakness.
Right.
But wait, how do you actually feign weakness when someone is swinging a lethal weapon at you? I mean, without just leaving yourself wide open to getting killed.
Well, you don't just drop your guard and hope they miss. That would be suicide.
Right. That seems like a bad plan.
Yeah. Feigning weakness means intentionally opening a very specific line of attack. You give them a target that looks vulnerable and that forces them to commit to a predictable trajectory.
Oh, wow. So you're baiting them.
You're totally baiting them. As they attack that specific line, you suddenly move away, making them think you are retreating. And the exact moment they relax their spirit because they believe they have you on the run, you dash in strongly. You completely manipulate their intention.
That is brilliant. Okay, so what's the third phase?
The third is tai no sen. This happens when both combatants attack simultaneously. Instead of just clashing against their momentum, you join their movement with what he calls a floating body, and as they draw near, you cut strongly.
So you kind of ride their wave.
Exactly. But the mechanism that anchors all 3 of these timing strategies is this metaphor Musashi uses. He calls it to hold down a pillow.
To hold down a pillow, which he says means not allowing the enemy's head to rise.
Right. He writes that in strategy, it is a fatal flaw to be led about by the enemy. You must lead them.
Always be in control.
Always. You stop their attack as they attempt to cut, and you throw off their hold before they grapple. And he provides this incredibly precise instruction for this.
This is the syllable thing, right?
Yeah. He says you must check the enemy's attack at the syllable at.
Like literally the start of the word attack.
Exactly. You check their jump at the syllable ju and their cut at q.
See, I love that. Holding down a pillow works exactly like a high-level debate.
Oh, how so?
Well, when you know an opponent's argument so incredibly well, you can stop them before they can even articulate the first syllable of their counter-argument.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it.
You don't let them finish the sentence. You literally cut off the thought at. But, I mean, realistically, acting on a single syllable or some microscopic muscle twitch, that sounds like it requires superhuman reflexes.
It sounds like it, but it's actually not about physical speed at all.
It's not.
No. In fact, later in the text, Musashi explicitly warns against having a fast, busy spirit. Speed implies rushing, and rushing means your rhythm is chaotic.
Oh, okay. So if you're rushing, you're not in control.
Exactly. Holding down a pillow is about profound perception. You aren't reacting to their movement. You are reading their intention before the movement fully materializes.
Because you've already figured out what they're going to do.
Right. By suppressing their useful actions, the attacks that could actually hurt you, and allowing their useless ones, you dictate the entire rhythm of the fight. Moving earlier is far more lethal than moving faster.
Moving earlier is far more lethal than moving faster. That's a great takeaway. But, okay, what happens if the opponent does manage to launch an attack, and that clean initiation turns into just chaotic pressure? How do you regain control when you are suddenly on the defensive?
Well, Musashi has a specific countermeasure for that scenario, too. He calls it treading down the sword. And he warns heavily against getting caught in what he calls a T-dum rhythm.
T-dum. Basically just trading blows back and forth. Parry, strike, parry, strike.
Right. It turns the conflict into a tennis match.
And a tennis match leaves the outcome entirely to chance and endurance, which Musashi obviously hates.
He despises it.
Yeah.
So treading down means defeating them at the very start of their attack. You tread with your feet, yes, but you also tread with your body, your spirit, and your sword, so they literally cannot rise for a second attack.
You don't just block the weapon, you smother the action
You
entirely.
smother it. And this connects directly to another concept he has, which is to no collapse.
Right. He writes that everything houses bodies, enemies collapses when their rhythm becomes deranged. It
Yes,
makes me think of a Jenga tower. You know, when you pull that one structural block and the whole tower starts to wobble, its rhythm is deranged.
that's a perfect image.
And when that happens, you don't step back and wait for it to stabilize. You push it over right then and there.
Exactly. Musashi insists that when the enemy loses timing, you must pursue them relentlessly, utterly cutting them down so they have no hope of recovering their position.
Relentlessly.
Yes, and he offers a mechanical method to force that collapse, which he calls injuring the corners.
Injuring the corner.
Yeah. He notes that it is incredibly difficult to move strong things by pushing them directly in the center. Think about it. If an enemy is standing firm, a direct assault is just a clash of strength.
It's just two walls hitting each other.
Right. But striking at the flanks, the corners, weakens the entire structure. If the corners are overthrown, the spirit of the whole body is overthrown.
Translating this outside of sword fighting, like, if you are negotiating a massive contract, you don't attack the competitor's strongest central argument head on.
No, that's a trap.
You poke holes in the peripheral clauses, you injure the corners until the central argument just cannot support itself anymore.
Exactly. You undermine the foundation.
But I have to say, the language Musashi uses here, treading down, utterly crushing, it sounds exceptionally brutal. It kind of borders on mindless aggression, doesn't it? Like you're just bullying your way through the conflict.
I can see how it sounds brutal on the surface, but it is highly, highly calculated.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Remember the welder's torch analogy you used earlier?
Yeah, the precise flame.
Right. Musashi explicitly notes that if you crush lightly, the enemy may recover.
Hmm.
So the intensity of the crushing is a calculated mechanism to end the danger instantly and definitively.
I see.
A real fire-consuming oxygen doesn't leave embers that can reignite, right? It finishes the job. The brutality is simply the removal of future threats by being completely absolute in the present moment.
Okay, that reframes it completely. So physical dominance and breaking the rhythm dictate the mechanics of the fight. But that is only half of the fire book.
Right. Only half.
The rest focuses entirely on psychological warfare.
Which is where it gets really fascinating.
Absolutely. Musashi explores how to manipulate the opponent's spirit and break mental deadlocks. And he introduces this tactic called becoming the enemy.
Yes, this is a brilliant shift in perspective. Musashi points out that people tend to look at a robber trapped inside a house, and they perceive that robber as a fortified enemy holding the high ground.
Right, because they're inside behind walls.
Exactly. But if you become the robber, if you put your mind inside their head, you realize they feel trapped.
They're terrified.
Exactly. He says they're a pheasant, and the person outside is the hawk waiting to swoop. They feel the whole world is against them, and there is no escape.
So just by changing your mental frame, you completely flip the power dynamic. It removes the intimidation factor entirely.
It does. It gives you the psychological high ground.
And then after that, he details a concept called passing on, which has to be arguably the most bizarre tactic in the text.
It is so strange, but so smart.
Right. He points out that yawns and sleepiness are contagious. We've all experienced this, right? Sitting in a room where one person yawns and suddenly 3 other people are yawning.
Oh yeah, you can't fight it.
Musashi claims you can weaponize this biological quirk. You can intentionally infect your enemy with a careless, bored, or weak spirit.
You literally make them bored.
Yeah, you make a show of complete calmness, maybe even sigh, and when they unconsciously mirror that relaxation, you attack strongly with a void spirit. I mean, the idea of weaponizing a yawn to make a lethal opponent drop their guard is just fascinating.
It's biological hacking, basically.
It really is. But wait, before we move past that, what exactly does he mean by a void spirit in this context?
Right, so a void spirit is a state of mental emptiness. But it doesn't mean being spaced out or unengaged.
Okay, so what does it mean?
It means harboring no specific readable intention. Look, if you are angry, your opponent can read that. If you are eager to strike, your muscles tense up and your opponent can read that too.
You're telegraphing your moves?
Exactly. A void spirit is a mind completely wiped clean of telegraphing. So you pass on a feeling of boredom to make them relax, and when you strike, you do it without giving off any prior signal. It is pure, spontaneous action.
Wow, it completely hacks the enemy's nervous system. Musashi deeply understands that humans are hardwired to mirror each other's emotional states.
He really does.
He uses his own external display to lower their internal defenses. That's just wild. But what happens when neither side falls for these tricks? When the conflict grinds to just an absolute standstill?
So he calls a deadlock a four hands situation. That's when both sides are striving with the exact same spirit and neither can gain any ground.
Like a stalemate.
Exactly. His solution to breaking this is the mountain sea change.
I love the imagery in this book, mountain sea change.
Isn't it great? The principle is, if the enemy expects a mountain, attack like the sea. If they expect the sea, attack like the mountain. You abandon the deadlock spirit entirely and introduce a completely new rhythm.
Basically, never try the same failed technique a third time.
Exactly. Pivot completely.
And then there's the psychological tactic that I think requires the most mental agility. The principle he calls rat's head, ox's neck.
This one is profound.
He explains that when you are bogged down in tiny, entangled details, the rat's head, you must suddenly shift into a massive, overarching spirit, the ox's neck.
Right.
Conceptually, it makes total sense. But what does zooming out from a rat to an ox actually look like in the middle of a frantic life or death situation?
So it acts as the ultimate cognitive reset. When you are in a conflict, your amygdala fires up, all right, triggering an acute stress response.
Right, fight or flight.
Exactly. And you get severe tunnel vision. You become obsessed with microscopic details, the exact angle of the opponent's blade, the minor feint they just made, or even just the specific word they used in an argument.
Yeah, you fixate on it.
That tunnel vision is the rat's head. You have entirely lost sight of the environment, the sun, the thresholds we discussed at the very beginning.
You are so deep in the weeds that you forget you're standing in a forest.
Precisely. So switching to the ox's neck breaks that tunnel vision. You force your awareness back out to see the macro-level battlefield.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And Musashi reinforces this with another principle, which is the commander knows the troops.
Right.
He says that even in single combat, you must step back mentally and view the enemy as if they were your own troops. You observe their movements, their limitations, and you realize you can direct them at will.
Oh, wow.
You transition from being a frantic participant reacting inside the fight to being the general overseeing the entire landscape.
You literally move your consciousness from the micro to the macro to regain control of the rhythm.
Exactly.
Tracking this journey through the fire book just reveals such a seamless progression. I mean, we start with the physical realities, right? Utilizing the sun, pinning someone against the corners of a room.
Foundational geometry.
Right, and then we move into the precise timing of forestalling an attack, holding down the pillow so they cannot even initiate at the syllable at. From there, it moves to crushing their rhythm, treading down the sword to eliminate that back and forth tennis match. And finally, it culminates in this deep psychological manipulation, passing on boredom, becoming the enemy, and resetting the stressed brain with the ox's neck.
It's an incredible escalation.
It really is. This text is the absolute essence of execution and winning the moment.
It is. And, all of this intense, fierce training leads directly to Musashi's closing thoughts in the Fire Book, which actually pivot back into profound philosophy.
Oh, right. The rock.
Yes, he introduces the concept of the body of a rock. He writes that when you have truly mastered this way of strategy, you can suddenly make your body like a rock and 10,000 things cannot touch you.
That's a powerful image.
It is. You become entirely immovable, both mentally and physically.
And he follows the body of a rock with this really tantalizing mention of a concept he calls to let go the hilt. He states there is a spirit of winning without a sword, but he intentionally doesn't explain it fully in writing. He simply says you must train well to understand it.
Which is such a Musashi thing to do.
Right. Just leave us hanging. But that leaves a massive paradox to navigate. I mean, Musashi dedicates the entire Fire Book to teaching you how to ruthlessly crush an opponent, how to break their rhythm, injure their corners, and utterly cut them down without hesitation.
And then he ends by teasing winning without a sword.
Exactly. How does that make sense?
Well, it represents the ultimate evolution of the warrior. Think about it. When your capacity to read intention holding down the pillow at the syllable at, when that becomes so impossibly refined, you actually resolve the conflict before it ever physically manifests.
Oh, I see. So mastering the absolute peak of aggressive execution, becoming that precise steel-cutting welder's torch of the fire element we talked about, that ultimately leads to a place where drawing the weapon just becomes unnecessary.
Exactly. Total capacity for destruction, when perfectly controlled, results in peace.
Wow. Total capacity for destruction, perfectly controlled, results in peace. That is a heavy thought to end on.
It really is. It changes how you look at the whole book.
It absolutely does. So, for everyone listening, as you navigate the week ahead, look closely at the conflicts arising in your own life, whether that's in a high stakes boardroom, a difficult negotiation, or just a complex project you're managing. Ask yourself, who is truly setting the rhythm? Are you trapped in a reactive T-dom cycle, or are you holding down the pillow and dictating the terms of engagement? Until next time, keep diving deep.